So I'm in my laundry room again, and I'm thinking about what happened when it came to me going to the Armenian church, which, by the way, they invited me back. There's an Armenian church here, and I might actually go to it because I'd like to say hi to the people again. Although I don't believe what they believe, I still have some people who want to, who are friends of mine there, in that church. I was in an Armenian church. I was also in a Calvinist church. I came to California, and I started to study both doctrines. And what I did was, first I did a word study. I had this thing called an exhaustive concordance. And what I wanted to look at was the word choose. How many times does it say that we choose God in the Bible? And how many times does it say that God chooses us, or that God's will? And we looked up words like will, God's will. And so I only found one place in the Bible where it talks about people choosing God. And that was choose this day. Only place. Only place in the Bible I could find it is choose this day whom you will follow. Choose this day who you will follow. Right? But it also has many scriptures that say that you didn't choose me, but I chose you. But you thought that you chose me. And so those people who chose him because God willed or worked in their heart for him to choose them. So even if it says that somebody chose God, it's more at God chose them first. And that's the whole point of the issue here, is that God works in our heart to change our heart, takes the stone heart out of us that basically would rebel against God anyway, and he has chosen us in him before the beginning of time. But no, that's not what the Arminian says. He's got to change the story around on you. It's not that God chose you before the beginning of time, but God knew that he saw into the future that you were going to choose him. And so before the beginning of time, he chose you after he saw that you were going to choose him in the future. Where is this doctrine found in the Bible? No, nowhere. Oh, yes it is. It says those he foreknew he predestined. Excuse me, it does not say those he foresaw into the future, that you were going to choose him first. So what does it say in Romans chapter 9? Romans 9, it's about nations. Oh, no, it's not. It says very clearly in Romans chapter 9 this. Paul says, I could be accursed for my own people. I'm upset because my own people have rejected Messiah. Right? And then he goes, but it's not as if the gospel has failed. Not all Israel is Israel. Not all Israel is Israel. Not every single Israelite who's descended from Abraham is part of Abraham's seed. Not everybody is part of Abraham's seed, but those who are according to the promise of faith. So what was the promise? The promise was this. It was said to Abraham, when his name was Abram, that your offspring, you're going to have descendants more than the stars in the sky. And Abraham believed God, and it was accredited to him as righteousness. So then, the child of the promise was Yitzhak, Isaac. But there was another child. His name was Ishmael. He was the son of Hagar, the maidservant. That he wasn't having any kids. He didn't have kids till he was 100 years old. In his 90s, 100 years old, right? So they went and they had Sarah, his wife, got his maidservant, and they had a baby together. But that wasn't the child of promise. That wasn't the child of promise. That was something that Abraham and Sarah did that had nothing to do with the promise. So not all of Abraham's children are of the promise. One of his children was Ishmael. But not only that, Yitzhak, Isaac, had children. He had Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau. Okay? And there were two children in the womb. And one of the children was chosen, and the other one wasn't of the promise. One child was of the promise, the other one wasn't of the promise. The promise that Abraham believed God, and it was accredited to him for righteousness. It was accredited to Jacob for the inheritance. But not all of Jacob's children, right? Not all of Jacob's children were of the promise, because we know that Joseph was the righteous one. The rest of them were not righteous. And then the children born of them, many of Israel, the Israelites rebelled over and over again. So we know that not every single Israelite or everybody that's descended from Abraham is part of Abraham's descendants. That there were other descendants that were grafted in through faith, through the faith of Abraham, who looked ahead and saw Jesus when he was told to sacrifice his laughter, his happiness. It was like a big mystery and a joke that he was to sacrifice his own son in order to show Jesus' sacrifice. And that through that promise, you will be called. Through the promise of what? The sacrifice of Christ. Through that promise, believing in that, believing in God. Abraham had to not only believe about the stars and this, he had to believe that his son, that this act that he made, okay, it was a picture of Jesus. So all of Abraham's children have to do with the sacrifice, with those who look upon Christ and believe. Those are the descendants of Abraham, and this is what Romans chapter 9 is talking about. So when it says the two twins, Jacob and Esau, were in the womb, and not having done anything good and evil, good or bad, before they were born, in order that God's purpose and his plan, according to election, not that he foresaw into the future and saw something that Jacob and Esau was going to do were good, but that his purpose, according to his election and his choice, never says that we made a choice. It never says that God looked into the future and saw that Jacob was going to choose him and Esau was going to reject him. Does this have to do with nations? Let me go further. No, this has to do with the children of promise that are elected by faith, that were elected by God, that was by God's choice. And that it says, the older will serve the younger. And you will say, that's wrong, that God chose them before they were born, before they did any good or evil. Is there unrighteousness with God? Certainly not. Right? For he says, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. Therefore it does not depend, and you said it's about nations, it says, therefore it does not depend on the man or the one, the person that wills. It doesn't depend on man's will. It doesn't depend on you looking into God, looking into the future and seeing what your will is, nor the man that runs, how righteous they were, but on God who shows mercy. It doesn't talk about nations. This is talking about people. It doesn't depend on the one who runs, the wills, or runs, but on God's choice, that his purpose might stand. This is, well, this was talking about the Pharaoh. I raised up the Pharaoh for this reason. No, because the verse goes down to, what if God did this? What if God rose up the Pharaoh to show his power and his righteousness, and put up with these vessels of wrath? When he says vessels of wrath, he's not talking about nations. He's talking about you being a vessel of either wrath or of mercy. And he's saying very, very clearly to you, he's saying that I put up with the Pharaoh, and I put up with the unrighteous, the vessels prepared for destruction in advance. This is what he says, so that I can show mercy, or I can show the riches of my glory to my vessels of mercy that I prepared in advance. The vessels of mercy being the people who will believe in Jesus Christ. Those are my vessels of mercy. And then he says, even us, not only from among the Jews, but also from among the Gentiles. So it's not talking about nations, it's talking about being the nation of Israel and being chosen by God to be part of that nation. So that's why it says even us, not just from among the Jews, because not all Israel is Israel, but also from among the Gentiles. And then it says in chapter 11, it goes, Israel, God has not rejected his people who he foreknew. That's who he planned. Those who he planned. Not willy-nilly he looked into the future. Those he planned according to his purpose, according to his will. God has not rejected his people that he planned. And Paul even says, am I not a believer? I'm a Jew, so he must have saved a remnant, and I'm part of it. There will be a remnant. So he has rejected his people, but he has saved the remnant from the Jewish people, but also he has saved us from the Gentiles, because he broke off branches to put us in there. And he will never reject us. But he will reject those who never knew him, who start to become arrogant, you Christians out there that rejoice in the law and don't accept Christ and don't accept God's teachings. So this is what Romans 9 in the context of it is all about, all the way from, and it's all, read all of Romans. I did, from beginning to end, from the beginning of Romans to the end of Romans. When it says that when it says that no one is righteous, there's no difference between Jew or Greek. We all come to Christ through faith in Abraham. Abraham was a big part of this. His righteousness was given to him by faith. This is what this whole thing is about. This is what the scriptures actually teach. And although Arminians don't want to accept it, you have to realize that you were loved. You were chosen in him, according to Ephesians. You were chosen in him before the beginning of time. You were not chosen because you chose him. It never says that you chose him. So I did a Bible study of all of this. I looked into the scriptures. I tried to find any place where we actually chose Jesus Christ. Nobody chooses Christ except apart from being born again. You must be born again. The Spirit goes where the Spirit goes, and those who have been given ears will hear. And the thing about this is that I love this. Oh, how do you know that you're chosen or not chosen? First of all, because I know this. I know this because I've read it. Second of all, because I know this. Because I know that God chose me from the beginning of time. I don't have to question it. Well, how do you know? Because, first of all, you wouldn't be able to understand this, even the things that I'm saying, unless God had revealed it to you. If you're watching this video, it may well be that God's calling you. God bless.